Hello there! Welcome to Skeleton Key Productions. I'm Crown Gray's Kokon. Let's get into the video. Today's video we're asking the question of what if Lincoln was assassinated during the Civil War? Now for those who know anything about history, you all ought to know that Lincoln was obviously assassinated in 1865, just after the Civil War had been concluded. However, what's not known by many people is that there were at least 2 assassination attempts made on his life during the time when he was president. And so we can imagine how the Civil War and how American history in general might have been different had he actually died in those 2 times. So the first one was the so-called Baltimore Plot in 1861, and the second one happened in 1864. So this is what we're going to speak about in this video. This video, by the way, was recommended by a Greater McCheesy. As we said, our alternative history videos are being suggested at this point. So, if you've got any ideas, if they're sensible ideas, if you think they're good ideas, let me know in the comment section and I will try my best to get them done. And also share with people, every person who watches this, find one person, find one friend, go through my channel, there's over 100 videos at the moment, find a topic and send it to them, right? That will help out the channel immensely, right? Also, obviously, hit the like button. We'll get into all that spill later. But for now, at least, just please do that for me. Anyway, enough of my shameless plug. Let's get back into the video. So just for a little bit of context, the election of 1860 was very, very contentious, right? So Lincoln only won it with 180 electoral college votes out of 352. So he won it by a margin of just 4 electoral college votes. And in terms of the popular vote, he won it by just 39.8% of popular vote, which is quite impressive, especially when you consider the fact that he actually wasn't on the ballot for pretty much every single southern state with the exception of Virginia. And even Virginia, he only got 1.13% of the vote. So considering he not only won the election, but he got 40% of the vote, at the same time as not even being on the ballot in half the country, that's pretty impressive, I must say, right? But of course, because it was so close and because obviously he didn't appear on the ballot in these states, it kind of gave a prelude to what was about to happen. So just on his election alone, several of the southern states split away. And so by the time of his inauguration, you already had a situation where several of the southern states had already seceded from the Union. So the so-called Baltimore Plot was a plot which was uncovered, and this was a plot to kill him on his way to the inauguration. So this is on February 23rd, 1861. And so it was hoped by many people in the kind of pro-slavery camp that by assassinating him, then whoever would replace him would be less hostile to the issue of slavery, and as a result, the South wouldn't feel such a need to break away from the rest of the Union. However, his vice president was the very famous Hannibal Hamlin. Yes, I had to look him up as well. Never ever heard of him in my life. So this person was the vice president in his first term, right? And he's not that well known. So I'll give a quick kind of summary of him. So basically, he was originally a Democrat, and he left the Democratic Party to join the new Republican Party over the issue of slavery. So he was, fervently anti-slavery, and this is why, he switched parties. So if he had been president, more likely than not, he would have, been very much on the same page as Abe Lincoln and wanting to abolish slavery at some point. However, this man was no Abe Lincoln, right? Abe Lincoln, there's a reason why he's on Mount Rushmore. He's a once-in-a-generation kind of American leader. So, yes, anyone less than that, Abe Lincoln struggled to do what he did in our own timeline. So having someone who's kind of mediocre and no one's really heard of, it wouldn't have been very, very good. Especially when you consider also that Abe Lincoln and him were not even that personally close. The vice president in those days tended to be seen as kind of a legislative role rather than an executive role. And so, he wasn't very central within the administration. So he was kind of just picked just to kind of be a balancing act because Abe Lincoln was from Illinois, which is kind of, seen as the West in those days. And Hamlin was from the North, from the state of Massachusetts. So so that was basically what the idea was. He was picked more from where he was born rather than his own innate qualities. So just to give an illustration of just how unpopular and unknown he was, there's a reason why when Abe Lincoln was assassinated in our own timeline, this man didn't take over. And that's because in 1864, during the Republican Convention, it was decided by an overwhelming majority that this man was going to be replaced with Andrew Johnson. So Andrew Johnson, he was a Southern Unionist. So although he was from the South, he wanted to unite the country. So he was seen as a so-called war Democrat. So he was from the Democratic Party, but he was in favour of the war, in order to kind of like bring the South under heel. So he wasn't in favour of the South splitting away, but he had many sympathies towards the South and was in favour of the institution of slavery still. And so in the first ballot of this convention, Hamlin got just 150 votes and Johnson got 200. And in the second round, Hamlin got just 17 votes to Johnson's 491. So this kind of just gives you an idea of just how unpopular this man was, right? So, even within his own party, people would rather pick someone who's from a completely different party than him. So yes, the history of America would be very, very different. The history of the Civil War would have been very different. It wouldn't have been as smooth sailing as it otherwise was. And in many years, especially in those early years, it was it was seen as very vital. That like America was kind of guided through this kind of like turbulent time. And with mediocre leadership, it would have been more difficult to have done this. Not to say it's impossible, and we'll get onto that in a little bit. But yeah, I think it would have been very difficult. And of course, Abraham Lincoln is famous for his Emancipation Proclamation, for his Gettysburg Address, for just his firm leadership during the Civil War, and also having, as he put it, charity towards all and malice towards none. So this idea of once we've won the war, let's not be retributive of our rivals. Let's bring them back into the fold. And so any other sort of leader who didn't have this kind of mindset, to try to reunite the nation after such a contentious civil war, it would have been very, very difficult. And then also, making the moral case for slavery in a way which was, politically practical at the time, because Lincoln at the beginning was not pushing for emancipation as such. Right. It wasn't until midway through the war that he kind of thought, actually, this is now a moral case. Right. This is now a thing where the fate of the Union is tied up within this issue of slavery, and that America can't continue to exist with half of it being free and half of it being slave. But someone who's just a fervent kind of anti-slavery person might not have been able to have the same nuance, might not have been able to tread that very careful path, which had to be kind of trod in those early years in order to kind of build this sense of consensus and trust, basically. So yes, I think that would have been very, very difficult if Abe Lincoln hadn't lived. So now that we've covered the first assassination attempt, now we're going to talk about the second one. And this one was much, much more real than the first one. So the first one was just a plot which, some detectives were kind of uncovered with unspecified people and no one really knows, right? Now this one, again, it was unspecified, but this one was an actual genuine attempt on his life. So Abe Lincoln had a habit of kind of going for rides off by himself. So after a busy day of being in the White House, what he'd often do is he'd get on his horse and he'd ride to the so-called soldier's house. And this is a place where he liked to, just relax and stuff and contemplate kind of the inner workings of the day and all the political affairs and military affairs, and he kind of used that as a time to be alone. However, one of the times when he went up there, he was sitting there and all of a sudden, there was a sniper who fired a shot, and this shot missed his head by literal inches, right? As a matter of fact, it left a hole through his famous hat, and, he was later found by a soldier who was on guard and stuff, and, he was... he was walking about, stumbling about without a hat and stuff, and obviously people in those days, they need to wear a hat everywhere, so it was quite an unseemly thing, and obviously the man was quite shaken up. But suppose, for instance, that lone sniper, who is unspecified and stuff, we don't know who he was or etc, anything about him, but suppose that lone sniper had got this clear shot on the president and actually killed him in 1864, how would this have changed the Civil War? Well, if you're expecting the South to have won, because we've done a video on this, right? So definitely check that video out. this is not one of those scenarios, right? I think regardless of what happens, as we said in that previous video, the only way that the South wins is if the North decides not to fight, just because the numbers are so much on the northern side, for population, for the economic development, railways, just everything, right? There's literally no way that the South actually wins in any kind of long and protracted war. So that's just something to kind of get out of your head. Like this doesn't affect the outcome of the war, especially by late 1864. This is the final few months of the war. Like the Northern soldiers are rampaging through the South with like Sherman kind of doing his march to the sea, burning up the city of Atlanta, etc., etc. Like there's no way at this point that the South is going to come back from this. So the North has practically won, and so regardless of who's in the presidency at this point, it doesn't really make much difference. However, because this assassination attempt happened in August, and as we said, the convention happened in early June, it meant that Andrew Johnson was now the vice president. So within our own timeline, Andrew Johnson took over the vice presidency. However, he was very staunchly pro-slavery, and so for many of the things such as the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, especially the 14th Amendment, this is the one which gave slaves citizenship. So you could just about get over the 13th one, which kind of abolished slavery, but the 14th one, which gave the former slaves actual citizenship rights, there's something which he was really staunchly against, and actually he tried to stop that amendment from being passed. And this is part of what led to him being impeached in 1868. So before Donald Trump, he was the only president who had actually successfully been impeached, or at least there'd been a serious attempt to impeach him. So that's something to really bear in mind, that, in terms of the politics of the post-Civil War America, Andrew Johnson really did try to hold back what became known as Reconstruction. So he didn't want the South to be transformed that much. He didn't want black people in the South to have that much rights. He didn't want the white Southerners to be punished as much as many radical Republicans wanted. So like you would have been even more tensions like this and stuff. Now, in terms of the election of 1864, I'm pretty sure that he still would have won it. In actual fact, I think he would have won it even more than Abe Lincoln, right? So Abe Lincoln in 1864 was running against General McGovern. So he was a Civil War general, kind of pretty much a failed Civil War general. He wasn't like that great. He was like played far too kind of cautiously and defensively and stuff, right? At a time when the South was basically rampaging over the North in those early years. And this man was very much in favor of kind of appeasing the South and trying to make some sort of compromise and stuff, even at this late stage. And so although he was a so-called war Democrat, he still allowed many people into his camp who were like so-called copperheads. So these were people who basically wanted to basically make peace with the South at whatever cost, and to bring them back into the Union, even if it meant keeping the institution of slavery going. So this man ended up losing to Abe Lincoln at 55% to 45%. So more likely than not, if Abe Lincoln had been assassinated a few months before this election, then Andrew Johnson would have got an even larger majority than Abe Lincoln ended up getting. And we can see this in the election of 1964. So a year before, you had the assassination of JFK, and LBJ end up winning by a landslide as a result of this, because when a very popular president ends up being assassinated, it means that his running mate, people feel kind of bad, they don't want to be horrible towards him, so they end up voting for the person who ends up taking over after him, right? So more likely than not, as different as Andrew Johnson was from Abe Lincoln, there's more likely than not a chance where they would have been like, oh, come on now, this the man's dead, at least let's vote for his running mate. So more likely than not, he probably would have won by an even larger majority than Abe Lincoln did. So this doesn't really change much, but I think that it does change kind of the level of support that people would have had for the Republican Party at that election. So I'm not sure how much of an impact Lincoln being assassinated at this late stage would have had. I think the first assassination attempt would have been very disastrous for America and would have had long-lasting influence on it. For this one here, I think, the second one, Abe Lincoln gets killed in a few months' time anyway. The Civil War is pretty much already wrapped up. I don't think that this second one, although this one's far more credible, I don't think that this one actually really changes much in the way of world history. So yeah, so with that being said, I hope that you really enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button. And as we said, share with at least one friend, share one video with one friend. It will help the channel out immensely. Also subscribe if you haven't already. Write a comment section as well if you have any alternative history ideas, or if you like this video, if you want to give me any tips and say you should do this better, you should do that better, etc, etc. Now, just to remind people, this is the last few months of us doing alternative history videos. We have been shifting more and more in recent times to doing clip videos on Tuesday and on Saturday, because obviously if you think about it, we're in May right now. We have alternative history ones going all the way back to January, so doing 2 a week since January, well actually since the channel began, we've always done 3 videos with 1 clip video and 2 fresh ones. We're changing the balance up a bit just because we don't want there to be such a big gap. So if you're seeing 2 clip videos come out a week, that's the reason for it and stuff. Yeah, we're just trying to make sure that we have everything all covered and all sorted. That way, when it gets time to move on to film reviews, which is what the channel's going to go on to next, we're not having this huge backlog which is going on for months and months and months. So if that's been a bit confusing, I hope that this chat here has kind of clarified that. So yeah, so the next video is going to be on what if the South split away from the Union today. So this video was recommended by Thomas Watson. So yeah, that's what we're kind of going to look into. We're going to look at the demographics, we're going to look at the Electoral College, we're going to look at a whole bunch of different things. So definitely stay tuned for that video. And in the meantime, have a great day and bye.